In episode 28 of the Propaganda Report, which is linked, I mentioned an example of how CNN was arranging headlines and images on their website to associate Trump with anti-Semitism and cause their audience to automatically accept the conclusions that the associations were suggesting. This is the example I was talking about. So the goal of propaganda of association is to cause the audience to feel about one thing the way that they already feel about another, causing them to automatically accept the conclusions that the associations are suggesting without critical thought, without considering alternative possibilities that might undermine these conclusions. The last thing that they want their audience to do is ask questions and find alternative possibilities. In this example, CNN is clearly trying to associate Trump with this story, "Bomb Threats Rattle U.S. Jewish Centers." In doing so, they're trying to accomplish a few things. They want the negative feelings that are triggered by the bomb threat story to automatically be transferred to Trump so that their audience feels the same way about him while reading through these articles. So this story is going to trigger fear, outrage, anger. They want their audience to automatically feel fear, outrage, and anger towards Trump as well. They also want their audience to automatically accept this story as more evidence to what they already believe, and that is that Trump is a racist anti-Semite who's just like Hitler. And they want their audience to uncritically accept the conclusions that the associations on their website through these images and headlines are suggesting, which are that the election of Donald Trump is directly responsible for a rise in threats to U.S. Jewish centers, and that white nationalist, racist, anti-Semitic Trump supporters are responsible for the bomb threats, as evidenced by the two articles directly below the image on the left that trigger fears of white nationalism. They want their audience to scan those headlines and accept those conclusions uncritically. They don't want them asking any questions that might undermine the conclusions that CNN is trying to put into their heads. For example, they don't want them to ask any questions about the 60 bomb threats received last month in the Jewish centers in the U.S. and Canada. They don't want them to ask how many bomb threats were received the month before, how many bomb threats were received on average during Obama's 8 years in office. We need to know the actual increase if we're going to understand the problem. They don't want them to withhold judgment about who's responsible. They don't want them to consider that police investigations are still going on and that it's irrational to come to a definitive conclusion about who committed a crime without any actual evidence other than the associations CNN created in their minds. And they absolutely do not want them to consider the long list of hoax hate crimes that CNN has been reporting over the past couple of months that have been initially blamed on Trump supporters that ended up not being true. And finally, they don't want them to weigh any of the evidence that might suggest that Trump is not an anti-Semite, despite provocative statements or vague statements that could be interpreted in multiple ways. They don't want them to consider that his daughter is Jewish, that his son-in-law is Jewish, that he is surrounded by Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people who work with him, that he has been for decades, and they don't want them to consider that he's been pro-Israel. They want them to look at this ridiculous arrangement of images and headlines and see bomb threats rattle Jewish centers, people fleeing, and see Trump, who's looking on like he's guilty, like he's watching to see how the air raid he launched against the U.S. Jewish centers are going. That's what they want them to see. The point isn't to say that people should dismiss the possibility that white nationalist anti-Semites are calling in bomb threats to Jewish centers, or to automatically dismiss the possibility that there has been an increase in these threats since Trump has taken office. Is that we should not accept the simplistic, spoon-fed conclusions that the mainstream media tries to put directly into our minds without asking any questions or critically analyzing anything, simply because those conclusions reflect what we already believe and validate negative feelings that we might have towards a policy or a politician or an ideology or anything else. Because if we refuse to weigh any evidence contrary to what we've already decided we believe, then we're not consciously living our life. We're not thinking for ourselves. We're not making our own decisions. We are under mind control. All news networks do this. Trump's not the only victim of it, and I don't give a rat's ass what conclusions you come to as long as they're reasonable and there's evidence to back it up. As long as your thought process isn't, "He's Hitler!" Give me logic and reason. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like this video, check back weekly for more.